Hey man, yo kakampe. Hey man, yo kakampe.
Hello and welcome back to Conversations in Black. I'm Jordy Quill, your host. And for this new episode of Conversations in Black, we're thrilled to have with us Senator Clement. Well, everyone knows Senator Clement, but I'll still make the introductions. So Senator Clement was appointed to the Senate in June of 2021 with a focus on representing injured workers in both English and French. And for us here, as you can see, I'm attending from my office. So she has been practicing poverty law for over 30 years at the Roy McMurtry Legal Aid Clinic in Cornwall. That's in Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. I hope I pronounced it right.
Beautiful.
Good, that's great. And after 3 terms as a city councillor, she was elected as the mayor of Cornwall in 2018, making her the first Black female mayor in Ontario. And enthusiastically, she's involved in her community, and she's been a member of numerous organizations and continues to be a strong voice for inclusion and diversity. And in her current role as a senator, she represents Ontario with a special place in her heart for Eastern Ontario and Franco-Ontarians. So without further ado, Senator, welcome to Conversations in Black, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
I would absolutely always accept an invitation to this kind of conversation. I don't know you long enough now. We're starting our conversation. We're starting. So I'm very pleased that I was able to meet you at the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers Conference, and very pleased to be here. Yes.
Thank you very much. So every time I have a politician, first questions first, because this is through our United Black, Caucus Action Committee, because we're trying to get millennials and then even younger to be more involved with politics, but public service. And for me, politics is a form of public service. And then I
Yes.
think it's very serious in terms of discussing policies beyond all the theatrics of politics. So my first question is like, because you started in the law, why politics? What made you decide, like, you know what, I want to be involved? Because you could have been a lawyer, be involved in a community. Why you thought it was time to make that step, and why electoral politics?
Right, absolutely. It really was about trying to make systemic change. So I love being a poverty law lawyer. It's something that I still do actually on a very part-time basis. But when about 10 years to 15 years into my career, I was representing the children of the clients that I had first represented when I was a young lawyer at age 25, 26. I realized that cycle of poverty, the circle, that we hadn't somehow as a society broken through to support people in ways that were more, helpful and more encouraging. And I felt, even though as a caseworker I was making a difference in individual clients' lives, I felt like going into politics would mean that I would have a seat at the table, especially when we're voting on budgets and money. So I ran for city council because then I could sit around a city council table as a councillor and vote for budgets that included, for example, recreation programs that were more accessible to people who, had financial issues, so that children could access, the same programs as other children in the community. And it felt like a different kind of work, a more systemic kind of work. And so politics really did do that. And then further on in my political career, I realized that representation matters a lot. And that has now informed this next part of my political career.
Wow, amazing. Then as a follow-up, because we hear many of the young people, quote unquote young adult, that we interact with are like, yes, politics, but for example, I don't have a name recognition. I don't know no one. Yes, politics does have a price, but there's cost, but if you have any advice, like, how do you start? So, okay, I'm involved with my community, but still, like if I'm at a writing where I don't have a chance, or I don't know how to fundraise, I don't know all these ins and outs of, of politics, I find sometimes it's like a barrier for some of them.
For sure.
So what kind of advice you would have for them if that's the next step they want to do, because they see something's wrong with the community, they want to get involved?
Right.
Then how should they go about it if they're like quote unquote a nobody in terms of name
Yeah.
recognition, right?
These are big questions and they're important ones. So I can lean into to how I did it. And I ran in 4 municipal elections, so 3 for city council, 1 for mayor. I ran federally twice in my riding, and I ran in a nomination race, right, to be the candidate. So I've done a lot. I've done a lot of it. And there are many barriers when you are a woman, a Black woman, when you don't come from a family of politicians or lawyers, when you don't have the local networks. I ran in Cornwall, was not born and raised in Cornwall. And so I often went to look for mentors, and the mentors did not look like me because there aren't many people that look like us yet. We're working on it at every level of politics. But I went and found mentors who could give me access to their networks because I needed networks. And so finding key mentors and supporters who were going to help me learn, give me credibility, were crucial, were really crucial. I want to make a plug here for municipal politics, right? Even if you have partisan politics in your head, in your sort of long game, municipal should factor in there at some point because, first of all, it's the level of government that's closest to the people. The impact that you have on daily lives is huge. The need for representation at local levels is huge. And by the way, in municipal politics, you can do all the big things. You can do infrastructure. When I was a city councillor, we built an arena, a wastewater treatment plant, a huge $60 million project that had environmental implications. You can do reconciliation. So our council was working with the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne towards a joint economic project. So think about municipal. And if you run and win municipally, let me tell you, every party is going to knock on your door because you're electable. You've proven your electability. And partisan politicians will show up at your door to ask you for what you need. But I think the main issue around barriers is to try and make sure you're finding mentors who are connected to community and who are going to be able to open up their networks to you. The other thing, and this doesn't sound very political, but you've got to do it all from a place of love. You have to have love in your heart to do this. You said earlier in your comments, politics, public service, it's all connected. But you have to, when you're trying to get elected, when you're trying to build up your community, you got to show love for where you live. And people will recognize that, no matter who you are or where you're from or what your background is. People do look for people who are doing things from their heart.
That's interesting. Then that prompts me a question is, since as a lawyer, do you see it also as another form of public service? And then you being a lawyer, you think like electoral politics is the logical end point of, because I mean, as a young lawyer myself, sometimes I'm in the court, I'm like, like, okay, it stops here in terms of you see the limit of what the law itself or the courtroom can do. Then
Right.
at some point, so as our original gangster, quote unquote, do you think that at some point that is the logical endpoint, is to, because you've seen the policy side of it, you're thinking the policy side of it, actually you have the everyday experience of how the law is impacting people, for example, like poverty law, if in terms of like housing, sometimes client comes for family law, but they have childcare access issue, then it's in terms of like income itself, then all of that, or if they don't have internet and then they can't print, and if you send them documents, so everything will be like paper, so all of those barriers. So do you think then going into politics, like, okay, that's the next form of advocacy?
For me, it was. I think it's not for everyone, but everyone needs to be thinking systemically, right? So people need to either be candidates, support candidates, or join organizations that are going to support collective thinking, that we're all in this together, that people that are suffering, that we all suffer because of that. We're all connected to that, right? So yes, poverty law for me, um, it's fueled me in terms of understanding that I needed to do more than the casework. I needed to be able for me to feel hopeful and useful. I needed to do both the casework and the systemic political work. So for me, it's not one or the other. It's doing sort of a lot of things at the same time. As a lawyer, that made me a better city councillor, and being a city councillor made me a better lawyer. Do you know what I mean? Those being connected to community and those jobs felt to me and still feel connected. So yeah, I think it's not an either or. You're doing different things, but the politics side of it certainly um, just gives me hope. And I know that doesn't sound right because politics has become this negative thing, right?
I know.
But it isn't. It isn't. It's actually, when you're doing things because you love where you live, because you love your neighbors, because you love your family, because you want to make things better, that's all positive. And most of the politicians I know, by the way, are in it for the right reasons. They're in it for those same reasons. So, it's a minority of people that are not there for the right reasons. Most of us are there because we really care about this particular issue or about our community or about the issues. So yeah, it's a powerful and good place, and we need more young people and more diverse people in those spaces.
And just to follow up on that, then you should practice also poverty law. And one of
Yes.
the barriers we get from especially people that we're involved with to try to get them involved in politics, whatever, it's just their own personal circumstances. And then, for example, I don't have stable housing, or I don't think I can access property right now because I have, since I'm 22, 24, I'm renting with my friends or have roommates, or I just can't make it, right? So it's not affordable anymore. So when you look at all of that, it's like, well, I'm not even stable. And now when we see with inflation, the cost of living and everything's like, I'm not even stable. Then you're forcing me to, to get involved. It seems as though it's like a well-to-do folks kind of activity where, you're so bored with life. And then that's unfortunately is the perception. Like, oh, you're kind of bored with it. Then you're like, oh, then let me think about policies. Because we can afford that. So what would be your counsel, quote unquote, or your take for this young Virgin who wants to do that, but they feel like they haven't arrived yet? But at the same time, like, okay, these things are affecting me. I have to do something about it, but it's just in my current or maybe foreseeable circumstances, then I won't have the luxury to even be involved in that capacity.
Yeah, you're very right about that. And our systems are designed, for wealthier people to be able to run and face barriers, right? Or older people, or retired people, people who already have pensions, whose children are gone from the house and they don't have as many responsibilities. And yet, the voices you want around the table are young parents or young people who are struggling with transit and with housing, because you need their voices there. So I think you have to ask for what you need. If you have a passion for this, you have to ask for what you need. People want to elect people who have vision and strength. They want to elect younger people. They do. So we have to find ways to support young people in that drive, and provide them with what they need, and then once we're in these systems, create systems that will, focus on childcare, that will focus on making it more accessible for women. I don't have children, and I can tell you that it would have been very difficult for me as a young city councillor, you know, years ago, to have kids and to also be working two jobs as a city councillor and a lawyer. Like, it would have been impossible. So the systems are not designed for the very people that we need around the table. So there is a lot more work to be done. But I think as individuals, we need to support candidates who are out there trying to do those things. And as candidates and young people, we need to ask for what we need and say out loud in public spaces, I want to run, but I need this. I need this to be able to run. And then we need to focus on how to support and eliminate those barriers for particular candidates. Or we choose to support candidates, right? We don't all have to be candidates. We can support candidates and find ways to support candidates who represent, you know, those voices that are not currently at the table. And I would say young people are really not sufficiently at that table, at any of those tables.
And how practically can they be involved? Like, if they, let's say someone is looking like, okay, maybe in 4 years there's next elections, and I know
Sure.
I might want to run, but they looking like for a blueprint. If you have any,
Yep.
just like, oh, I just walk into like a Rotary Club, or I just
Oh, well,
like volunteering, a bunch of volunteers. But if that's the idea, just early on, I start just like door knocking on my neighbors' doors, like, oh, just in case in 4 years, just to build that name recognition. Like, what would
well,
be
I mean,
practical like steps for, like, I'm looking at it, but how do I jump?
sure. So first of all, door knocking, that was always my favorite thing in a campaign, but let's set that aside for a minute. Obviously, Rotary clubs, I mean, I love Rotary, and you know, those are my favorite kinettes. Those are my favorite groups. They're so, and they have such long histories with committees and communities. What I often suggest to people, and again, I'm always focused on municipal, it's my first love and continues to be a love of mine. Every city and every region that you live in, generally, a city council will have various committees. Depending on how big a city you live in, there's a transit committee, there's a youth advisory committee, there can be a housing. There's been lots of housing committees in the last few years, right? There's often an equity and diversity committee. I tell young people, join those committees, put your hand up. They're always looking for volunteers. And that gets you right into close up and personal, not just the city bureaucracy, but also the city council. Often those committees will come to city council, will present, the city councilors will get to know you. You might have airtime at a council meeting, and that's all about building your brand, your name recognition, and also making you feel comfortable with those spaces, right? So yeah, I think municipal committees are a great place to start.
Okay. Now I wanted to focus more so a bit about because it touched on young folks practically, but since you're a lawyer as well, for young lawyers and the issue of legal aid, funding for legal aid, and just affordability in general. What advice you might have for young lawyers? Because probably you know this, the perception of them more and more trying to see is they're also becoming working poor, especially, you know, the first year after the bar, working poor, and then they're also seeing like the prospect, as many of them also do qualify, unfortunately, even to be eligible for legal aid. So in that, as someone who've done the work, you know, from my 30 years as a young lawyer, and then they're like, okay, my heart is in it, I want to help, this is people who need help, but at the same time, you know, I have housing to pay, or I have affordability, or to eat, right? Because I just, like, with a friend, she's a lawyer as well, you know, tell her name, no name, but, you know, she was telling me, oh, I went to the food bank, right? But when I tell people are like, what do you mean? What are you taking advantage of something where people really need it? Because there's this perception also out there as, like, you know, a lawyer, then you're making a lot of money, but some of them are just at the beginning, right? And then also with the current economic situation, it might be hard for firms, so which means in terms of production. So what advice for those young lawyers, because many also are losing the passion, I guess, to serve, or also to do this, then it'll be a pity to have them just, you know, quit the profession. So if you can have any, I don't know, word of advice, someone who's at the end of that tunnel, if you like it gets better, or what they can do in terms of strategy, or it's just the good old, well, suck it off, you know, hard times, and then put in your years, and then we'll see where it takes you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously time will have its impact. But sometimes it's not great impact in terms of time, right? So I can only speak from my perspective, right? When I was a young lawyer, I was incredibly lonely. There weren't many that looked like me, and I didn't have access to networks, and I didn't ask for help. I just didn't. That's not what was done. And so when you don't say what you need, you don't get that in return. And so I think young lawyers really need to feel connected to one another. So associations like, the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers are very important. Connected to community, always feeling useful. When I was at my loneliest, just doing some of the volunteer community work just made me feel useful. I didn't feel confident as a lawyer. I wasn't sure about where this career was going to take me, but turning to my community and being helpful made me feel useful and made me feel better. And I would now, if I had to do it over again, ask for help. I would ask for mentors. I would approach lawyers to say, I want to keep doing this. I need help here. I need some focus here. I would ask for what I need, because people are not necessarily going to step up if they don't know what it is that you need. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it really is about connecting to community, connecting to other networks of people that are like you so that you're not lonely, and then asking for what you need. When I was appointed to the Senate, I got a letter from somebody who had supervised me as a student. And
Oh.
in the letter, they congratulated me and they said, I knew you were going to do well in your life. But that person didn't tell me that when I was a student, right? And so I needed to hear that back then, not now. And so I really think, what could I have done differently? Should I have said to that person, hey, I need I need you to supervise me, but I need more than that. I need support. And I didn't know how to ask for that, or I was too shy to do so. And so I think people need to be, sadly, this is a time now that calls for boldness, because the situation is stark for young people. It's stark around housing, and around opportunities. And so say what you need, and those of us who have been through that will hear the call, and we'll be there.
As the last question, then, because that's practical, then how do you go about finding a mentor and a good mentor, right? Because that's often the last thing we hear. Like, well, you just approach random people. How do you actively find a mentor, identify them, get them to actually accept to be your mentor, right? And how, like, practically you go about establishing that mentor-mentee relationship?
Yeah. So I'm mentoring some people, a couple of women who want to run for office. And then I mentored a young woman who, through her campaign for city council, and then in her first year as a city councilor. So we met through, again, networks, right? These are young Black women. And so I'm in Black networks. They read up on me, they read my biography, and there was something about my biography that resonated for them. They reached out to me, sent me their CV, and explained their plan and their needs. And so we went that way. And then we interviewed each other, because a mentorship relationship is a two-way street. They need mentorship, but I also need to mentor. You know what I was telling you about before, about not being able to understand, to being too shy to ask for what I need. I need to be able to help people now. Like I've had the benefit of those years, and those struggles have helped me understand things, and I want to be able to share that. And I need to I need to do that. If I'm going to pay back something, that's what I need to do. So the relationship with a mentor and a mentee is reciprocal. And so we interview each other and then work on a plan together that's going to be helpful to the young person, but also to me to continue to be effective in my role as a senior lawyer now, and as a senator.
Wonderful. Well, Senator, thank you very much for your time, for accepting our invitations, and I hope it was practical for our members how to get involved, how to consider municipal politics, and how to go. I guess what the takeaway for me, it's like be intentional if you want a mentor, or if you have a desire to run. So be intentional in your actions, who you're seeking counsel from, and so on and so forth. So hopefully you guys stay connected. We'll have many more conversations. There's many more coming. This is the new season, and hopefully you take some benefit out of that. And I'll see you at the next conversation. So long.
You're a wonderful interviewer, and I know this will not be our last conversation. I appreciate your work. Merci beaucoup, beaucoup.
Merci.
Hey man, yo kakampe. Hey man, yo kakampe.